After several delays, Season 3 of The Mandalorian is finally here, but somehow the show has managed to get even dumber than it was before.
Is it my imagination or is TV getting worse?
One of the major issues that this series has always had is the story is devolved down to something that I would call the video game method. This is where the main character is constantly going to a different place to get a thing or to talk to a person, and that leads to him going to another place to get a thing or talk to a person. The main story is frequently being put on hold in order for the main character to finish a couple of his stupid side quests. Not only is this a lazy and amateurish way of telling a story, it's also a way to artificially stretch out the length of a season. Every time your main plot starts to progress, you put an artificial stop right in front of it, and the characters have to go on some side quests before they can continue the main story.
It is a tale told by an idiot.
This kind of padding is also used in the individual episodes as well, and it's been a significant problem for all of the shows on Disney+, whether it's Star Wars, Marvel, or whatever. Individual scenes in an episode will be stretched out with an incredible amount of filler, thereby extending the runtime of the episode itself, and then you need more episodes, which increases the length of the season. I say this without any exaggeration whatsoever, that for every 10 minutes of this show, you probably get only about 1 or 2 minutes of actual story content, and the rest is just filler that doesn't even need to be there. Another glaring problem with the Mandalorian series in particular is that the story for it is unbelievably contrived, and it's full of plot holes and all sorts of plot conveniences that just happen to happen at the exact moment the main characters need it to happen. The Mandalorian is bad, Episode 1. I think the first thing I need to address is the fact that I'm now labeling this series as is bad, whereas the first 2 seasons were labeled as is good. Looking back, I think I know what happened. First of all, I believe that I was trying to be a little too fair because I was still kind of new to all of this, and the problem with being too fair is that you'll often overlook things that probably should have been legitimately criticized. Recently, I've seen other YouTube channels that make content similar to mine who have started to do this exact same thing, specifically with Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Now, it's entirely possible that these guys genuinely enjoy Season 3 of Picard, even though the show is still absolute garbage. But it seems to me far more likely that they're being overly fair, just like I was, where they're ignoring all of the problems and they're wearing rose-tinted nostalgia glasses. Although between you and me, I think that at least 1 or 2 of these guys are trying to diminish the "you're always negative because it's popular to hate on things" persona. I, on the other hand, I don't give a fuck. I don't care if they think that I hate everything or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. If a show is fucking garbage or a movie is trash, I'm gonna say that it is. And I'm not going to change my opinion or kind of soft pedal some of this stuff just because I'm afraid some people will say, well, you're being a little too negative. Yeah, I don't care. Fuck off.
I'm not looking to reach an understanding with these people. My goal is to defeat and humiliate and demoralize them.
Another reason why I initially thought the Mandalorian series was good was because compared to all of the other slop we've been getting in Star Wars with the sequel trilogy and some of the other stuff, it was good from a relative perspective. But now that I look at it, just because something is sitting on the top of the garbage pile doesn't change the fact that it's still garbage.
That is one big pile of shit.
Having said all that, Season 1 and 2 are in fact bad, and if I was to go and review them once more, I would label them as such. But Season 3 looks like it's gonna be even worse, which is, something to look forward to. This episode begins with the Mandalorian armor crafting a new helmet, and remember how I said that Disney Plus shows like to pad out their episodes? Well, this is a great example of that, because this entire episode is only 31 minutes long, and yet this scene of the armorer making a helmet lasts for over 2 minutes!
I'm sorry. What?
When the armorer completes the helmet, she steps outside the cave and we see a foundling who's being inducted into the Mandalorian. This young man looks kinda what I would expect a younger Mando to look like, so I thought this was a flashback when I first saw it, but it's not. In fact, this is just some random foundling that we've never seen before and is not important in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Also, side note, don't you think it would have been a good idea to go and see a barber and have your hair cut short before you have to wear a helmet every day for the rest of your life? Because having long hair and a helmet is both going to be uncomfortable, and it's probably going to get in the way and maybe block your vision a little bit. So, haircut, I guess.
Am I right?
During the ceremony, the armorer places the helmet on top of the foundling's head. Then she dips a wooden bowl into the water, and before she places the water over the foundling's head, both of them have to recite a sacred oath. And the armorer leads by saying, "Bless him with salt, bless him with steel. What is dead may never die, but rises harder and oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's the oath from Game of Thrones. See, I got confused because this scene in The Mandalorian is directly ripping off the scenes of the Ironborn from the Game of Thrones series. Why? Because the writers are fucking garbage and they can't come up with anything original.
Are you not entertained?
For those of you that would like to keep track, this little ceremony takes another minute and a half of screen time, which means that at this point, we have now surpassed 11% of the total episode, and yet nothing of any significance has happened at all. But don't worry, it gets worse. Even though the writers decided to completely rip off the Ironborn from Game of Thrones, they didn't use a kraken. Instead, the writers on this show decided to use a giant alligator, which launches itself out of the water and begins attacking the Mandalorians.
You serious?
The foundling is almost eaten by the giant alligator, but the armorer notices some bubbles out in the water mere seconds before the alligator thing attacks. Now, the Mandalorians have set up a base at this location. We know that because the armorer has her entire forge set up inside the cave. There is no possible way that the Mandalorians would have gone through all that effort and not be well aware of the giant alligator thing that lives right offshore.
That's because you're stupid.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, isn't it kind of stupid to have this ceremony with the foundling standing in the water when the giant alligator thing lives right offshore? And yeah, it is kind of stupid, but it might be required by the ceremony. And I say that because we learn later in the episode, actually in the next couple minutes, that there are some sacred waters under the planet of Mandalore, but they can't go back there because the planet was kind of destroyed and poisoned, and it seems to be inhospitable to any kind of life. So they can't go back there to perform the ceremony, so they're just doing it wherever they can, and they use whatever water they can. So it does make a little bit of sense that the Mandalorians are willing to take the risk for this incredibly important ceremony, but what doesn't make sense is that the Mandalorians wouldn't have any sort of early warning system or detection to let them know when the giant alligator thing is approaching the shore. There is a million different methods and devices that the Mandalorians could have employed to use as early detection for the giant alligator thing, and yet they never did any of them, because apparently all of these Mandalorians are just really, really fucking dumb. But don't worry, it gets worse, because now the Mandalorians have to actually fight the giant alligator thing, and it is pathetic. It is just truly awful. For some reason, all of the blasters that the Mandalorians are using have no effect on the alligator thing at all. You can clearly see that it's being hit hundreds and hundreds of times, but for some reason they just don't do anything. They don't even leave a burn mark. It just kind of hits the alligator and fizzles away.
That's very disappointing.
Let's assume for a second that the hide is somehow impervious to blasters. Wouldn't these extremely talented, some of the best in the galaxy warriors get the idea to, I don't know, shoot it in the eyes? Maybe?
I'm blind!
Instead, the Mandalorians come up with a much dumber plan, where some of them use jetpacks to fly up on top of the alligator thing and plant explosives, but now that we can see the alligator thing from above, we can clearly see that it has a very hardened shell, and I would have to imagine that this is going to be even more difficult to get through than the hide that is on the other parts of the alligator. But these Mandalorians don't seem to care. They just slap down a bunch of explosives and let them go off, and what do you know? Surprise, surprise, they do absolutely nothing.
I don't know what I expected.
Just like with the blasters, there's no damage to the alligator thing, not even a burn mark, which makes me stop and want to point out something. You know how the Mandalorians really value Beskar steel because it's super strong and resistant to blasters? Well, so is the hide of this alligator thing. I mean, the shell is impervious to explosions. So rather than trying to track down all of the extremely rare Beskar armor, wouldn't it make more sense for these Mandalorians to just, I don't know, cut up the dead alligator thing and use its leather and its shell to make new armor? I mean, with the Beskar steel, you have weak points because it's metal and you can't cover the joints and stuff, right? But with the hide of the alligator thing, it would cover everything and it would be completely blaster proof, as we're seeing in this fight scene right here. And you could use the shell for other parts and as a shield or something, and it would be completely immune to any sort of explosive. So, you know, what the fuck is going on here?
That's what turns me on about you. Your attention to detail.
Somehow, the Mandalorians managed to get even more incompetent because now they decide that they want to use their grappling hooks on the alligator thing.
I don't think you should do that. I really don't think you should do that.
And as a result of a miraculously bizarre twist of fate brought upon by shitty writers and their plot contrivances, the grappling hooks easily penetrate into the alligator thing.
This makes no sense to us.
I really don't have any idea why this show believes that heavy blasters and explosives aren't able to get through the hide of the alligator thing, but a shitty little grappling hook can. Also, I'm genuinely confused at what the exact strategy going on here was, because I can't imagine the purpose of what these grappling hooks would even be. None of the Mandalorians are trying to tie down the grappling hooks to a rock or to the ground or something that would tether the alligator thing in place, making it easier to deal with. They don't do that. Instead, the Mandalorians are they're just trying to hold on to it.
Not a great plan.
The alligator thing probably weighs over 20,000 pounds. What is it that these stupid rinky-dink Mandalorians with the grappling hooks think they're actually gonna be able to do? Do they think that they can control it like a balloon at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade? That's not how it fucking works. This thing is gigantic and it's pissed off. You're not gonna be able to hold on to it. And we see exactly what happens moments later as the alligator thing decides to roll a few times and all the Mandalorians with their grappling hooks are yanked off their feet and thrown through the air, because what the fuck else were you expecting? This entire stupid fight lasts for about 3 minutes of wasted screen time until finally Mando shows up in his starship and just casually blasts the alligator into pieces. In the following scene, all of the other Mandalorians just kind of vanish into thin air, and Mando enters the cave with the Armorer's Forge, and you would think that maybe she would thank him, but no, instead she berates him. She says that he removed his helmet and he's not welcome there. This is all stuff that we learned in the Book of Boba Fett series, but for some reason the writers need to remind us of this. And also, don't forget that he just saved the life of pretty much everyone on that beach, and again, none of that matters because she needs to tell him that he's not welcome there.
Who the hell is this bitch?
I'd like to take a brief moment to remind everyone that the whole Mandalorians aren't allowed to remove their helmet is a bunch of stupid bullshit created by Filoni and Favreau, specifically for this series, because up until the first episode of The Mandalorian, the concept that Mandalorians weren't allowed to remove their helmet was not a thing at all, ever. It just wasn't a thing. So it was retcon canon destruction by the idiots working at Disney once again. Regardless, Mando is only there on the planet so that he can tell the Armorer he plans to go back to Mandalore. According to their nonsense bullshit code, if he goes to Mandalore and he bathes in the sacred waters under it, then he'll be forgiven for having removed his helmet. And I have to ask, why would he need to go and tell her this is his plan? Can't he just go to the waters, do the thing, get the evidence, and then show her after? But no, we need to have this stupid scene because the audience apparently needs to be reminded of all of this stupidity that's been happening. But the Armorer says that it's not possible because Mandalore was basically turned into glass and poisoned by the Empire. However, Mando shows a green rock with some inscriptions on it. Apparently, this is a piece of kryptonite that came from Mandalore. Mando got it from a Jawa, who got it from another guy, who got it from a trader who visited the planet on whatever, something, I don't know, who cares. The thing is he has a little piece of kryptonite and it has some writing on it, and it proves that people can go to Mandalore. Now you might be thinking, hang on a second here, I watched the previous seasons of The Mandalorian, and I don't remember Mando ever getting this extremely important piece of kryptonite from any of the previous episodes, or even during the Boba Fett series. It never happened in any of that, and that's because it didn't. Mando just managed to acquire this extraordinarily important plot device off screen in between the seasons. Isn't that great?
It's just a crutch used by lazy, boring writers.
I mean, after all, why bother trying to tell a story when you can just plot convenience everything off screen?
That's the most retarded shit I ever heard.
Mando insists that he's going to head back to Mandalore, and the armor reluctantly agrees that if he does somehow prove he bathed in the sacred waters, that he will be forgiven. I'm not exactly sure how this is supposed to happen. Maybe Mando has to take a selfie when he's sitting in the sacred water bathtub. Who knows?
This is the way.
Mando leaves the planet and jumps into hyperspace, and because it's going to take a while, he decides to put it on autopilot and just take a nap. So now we get to enjoy, and I'm not kidding here, over a full minute of Goku just staring out the window and looking at stuff flying by in hyperspace. This entire traveling scene is a colossal waste of time. It should have been at most a few seconds. Instead, it's over a full minute of blatant episode padding.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
And it doesn't stop there. When he finally arrives at the planet Navarro, the show spends several minutes just watching Mando walk around the city doing nothing.
Please, no more.
And it doesn't stop there either, because eventually he's approached by Greef Karga, who begins explaining what's been going on since Season 2. He's now a high magistrate, and the planet's been making a lot of money from trade and mining. All of this could have been summed up in about 20 seconds, but instead the show decides to drag this on for several more minutes. Again, more episode padding.
Please stop doing that.
Eventually, a droid interrupts this boring conversation to tell Greef that a bunch of pirates are in the city causing problems. Greef and Mando head out there to see what the situation is, and it turns out that the bunch of pirates are trying to get into a building so that they can have some drinks. The problem is that the building is no longer a cantina, it's been converted into a school. Greef has known these pirates for a long time, back from when he was dealing with the bounty hunter stuff, so he just tells them, look, I'll gladly buy you some drinks, but we need to go somewhere else. For some unimaginably stupid reason, the pirates insist that they will only drink in this building. It makes no sense. There is no rational explanation for why they are so determined to drink in this one particular building. It just happens because the writers needed to create a conflict.
This is terrible.
What's even more frustrating is when you realize that this back and forth inane conversation of Greef saying, no, you can't drink in there, followed by the pirate saying, well, I want to drink in there, and then Greef saying, well, no, you can't drink in there, and then the pirate says, well, I want to drink in there, and this back and forth conversation lasts for over 2 minutes.
No! No!
Regardless, the conversation eventually ends in a fight where Mando and Greef take out most of the pirates except for one. Greef lets him run away because he wants him to spread the word that pirates are no longer welcome there. And it kind of makes a little bit of sense, I suppose. Greef then tells Mando that he's in desperate need of a new marshal, and this is where the show brings up the absence of Gina Carano. Her character of Cara Dune is obviously missing because Disney is run by a bunch of fucking morons, and I had expected that they would do something disrespectful to the character, like just having it die off screen, but instead, Greef says that Cara Dune was recruited by Republic Special Forces and that she's off on some important mission. And this doesn't change the despicable actions of Disney and what they did to Gina Carano, but I am genuinely surprised that they're showing the character at least a modicum of respect.
I was not expecting that.
Mando says that he can't be the new marshal because he has important stuff to do, although he doesn't actually tell Greef what it is for some unknown reason. But don't worry, it gets worse. Mando then reveals his reason for traveling to Navarro. He needs to get IG-11. This is the droid from the previous seasons. If you recall, this droid was completely and utterly destroyed when it self-destructed in order to protect the others in the group. But apparently, that just doesn't matter anymore, because despite the fact that the explosive was in IG-11's torso, and that there is absolutely no possible way the droid would be salvageable, somehow, miraculously, Greef Karga managed to find IG-11's head and his torso completely intact.
A very thorough investigation that has found no evidence of foul play.
I would like to point out that the entire purpose of the self-destruct mechanism in the IG droids is because their technology is so valuable that it cannot be allowed to slip into enemy hands. So, if an IG droid is ever in danger of being captured, they are required to self-destruct, and this self-destruct process is so devastating that it renders the entire droid unusable by anyone. And yet, fully intact head and torso.
You must think me a fool to make your lies so transparent.
It's been revealed that the parts that they could find of IG-11 have been turned into a monument honoring him in the city, which does seem a little bit morbid, and the other parts that they couldn't find were just added as part of a statue. Mando and Greef take down the parts of IG-11 that somehow miraculously survived, and they bring it to a workshop. Mando tries reactivating IG-11 with the very lame, stereotypical, idiotic sparking wires trick that you see basically every single person that's ever tried to jumpstart a car in every stupid movie or TV show. They use this sparking wires trick, and it looks fucking ridiculous. Using this ridiculous tactic, IG-11 somehow reactivates, but it defaults to earlier programming where it was sent to destroy Goku. Everyone in the room panics, and Mando starts shooting it with the blaster, but for some reason it has no effect. I don't know what it is or why blasters have suddenly become completely useless, but here we are. Greef's protocol droid manages to stop IG-11 by dropping a bronze statue on IG-11's head, to which Mando says, "Now that's using your head."
Get out.
I can't believe that someone in the writer's room actually thought that was funny and that it needed to be included, and that it was actually scripted, read out loud, recorded, edited, and then put into the show. Fucking pathetic. Now you might be wondering, why is Mando trying to get this droid so desperately? I mean, couldn't he just have any other companion like Greef or Caro or someone else go and help him on the planet? But apparently, Mandalore is way too dangerous and they don't know if it's still poisoned. So, Mando wants to have IG-11 to use kind of like a canary in a coal mine sort of deal, right? Where he can send the IG-11 droid down, check if it's poisonous. I mean, this is my assumption on this because there's no other reason why he would need this specific droid. And he wants to have the droid go and check it out and whatever. But the reality is that he could use any other sort of droid for this. And he doesn't even need to actually use a droid. I mean, he could just hover around the planet in his ship and launch something down into the planet to take some readings and to check if it's still poison, right? Like, is it going to be dangerous to breathe the air and all that? Like, you don't actually need a droid to do that. There are so many different ways that you could go and check. And honestly, it boggles the mind as to why none of the other Mandalorians have ever bothered to try and do it. I think the reason why the writers are creating this entirely contrived stupidity is because they want to bank on viewer nostalgia for people who actually like the character of IG-11. And also, Disney probably wants to sell more IG-11 toys as well.
Hello, I like money.
Greef reluctantly agrees to help Mando fix IG-11, so he brings him to a group of the best droid repair aliens in the universe, and it turns out to be the little guys from the last Star Wars movie. Because despite the sequel trilogy being a hilarious failure, Disney is determined to double down or triple down and connect all of this garbage together. Which once again forces me to remind you that Disney Star Wars is not canon.
I have spoken.
Mando tries talking to these aliens, but he doesn't understand what they're saying, which seems kind of weird because while it's true half the words they say are some sort of alien gibberish,
do you speak any English?
The rest of it is completely comprehensible English, or galactic basic, whatever you want to call it. The point is that I can understand what these little stupid aliens are saying, and Mando absolutely should be able to understand them.
Understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
But for whatever reason, he can't, and then Greef Karga has to translate for him. The aliens say that IG-11's memory circuit is completely destroyed and needs to be replaced, but the problem is that they don't get manufactured anymore, which is a bunch of bullshit because the IG droids definitely are still in use many, many, many years after the events that are taking place right now. So the writers are once again creating a problem that just shouldn't exist. So Mando says that he'll try to track down a memory circuit, and the aliens agree to fix it if he can find one, but ignoring all of that stupidity, I can't help but notice a fairly glaring problem with this entire situation, because Mando claims that the IG droid is his friend and he wants him back. Okay, whatever. But the memory circuit was destroyed, which reverted back to earlier programming. And this means that the good version of IG-11 that became Mando's friend no longer exists. All of that data in the memory circuit was wiped out, and it's beyond repair. And if you take a new memory circuit and put it into the IG-11 droid, then it's not going to be the old one. It's a blank circuit. I mean, yeah, you can program it and give it some orders and stuff, but it's going to be an entirely new personality. It's not going to be the same IG-11 droid from before that was his friend, because all of that programming and all of that data is gone. It doesn't exist. And the guy who wrote that program is also dead.
Excellent point.
So I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that when IG-11 finally gets repaired, it's simply going to act in the way he did before, as if he was a good guy the whole time, which shouldn't be possible because, again, all that programming was completely wiped out with a broken circuit. This entire situation is fucking contrived idiocy.
That is an entirely implausible plot development.
We get several more minutes of blatant episode padding until Mando finally takes his ship into space, and during this he's trying to show Goku how the ship works until suddenly he's attacked by the pirates from before. Then we get a very boring space battle that lasts for several minutes until Mando finally remembers that he has the super go fast button.
How dumb are you?
And I'm not even talking about jumping into hyperspace. If you remember, his ship has a super fast mode that works outside of hyperspace in normal space, and it allows Mando to essentially outrun most everybody. For some bizarre reason, he doesn't use this until the fight is already over.
For some reason.
Also, we get a look at the captain of the pirates, which is Swamp Thing, apparently.
Oh my God! What's wrong with your face?
Eventually, he lands on some new planet in order to speak to Bo-Katan. In Season 2, her plan was to get the Darksaber and reunite all the Mandalorians. However, when she returned without the Darksaber, she was abandoned by all her forces. In the second season, with Mando's help, she was able to steal a whole bunch of Imperial ships and fighters, but evidently now she has nothing because the Mandalorians just took all that when they left. So now she doesn't have any ships or any forces, and she's just sitting alone in a gigantic empty castle.
You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you.
When Mando tries to talk to her, she has a very pessimistic, defeated attitude. She lost everything and she just doesn't seem to care anymore. I've seen some people trying to equate this with what happened to Luke Skywalker becoming Jake Skywalker in The Last Jedi, but I don't think that's a fair comparison. First of all, Bo-Katan lost her entire army and fleet of starships, and to be fair, that was a pretty significant amount of work to get all that stuff, and now it's just gone. I think some amount of grumpiness is warranted in that situation, but secondly, it's not a good comparison because Luke Skywalker is one of the most well-known and important characters in all of Star Wars, and having him behave like he did in The Last Jedi was a fucking travesty. Whereas this character of Bo-Katan is practically a nobody who only existed in a stupid cartoon created by that moron Dave Filoni. The two characters are, simply put, not on the same level, and it can't be compared. Regardless, Mando says that he's going back to Mandalore even though it might be poisoned, and while she's not going to go with him, she does give him the information where he can find the sacred waters. And that was 31 minutes of an episode. More than half was unnecessary filler and padding, spending an enormous amount of time watching characters simply walk around or sightsee through a fucking window is not interesting. Also, watching the Mandalorians, who are supposed to be some of the best warriors to ever exist, spend several minutes getting their ass handed to them by some stupid CGI alligator is not exciting. The video game formula for this series is in full effect. Mando goes to a place and talks to a person who tells him to go to a different place and get a thing or talk to a person, and then he needs to go somewhere else to get a thing or talk to a person, rinse and repeat ad nauseum. I find it unbelievable that the main writer on this series is likely getting paid well over $100 grand to generate what is the equivalent of fan fiction written by a 5th grader. Honestly, there's only two good things that I can say about this episode. First, the theme song is still pretty awesome. And second, none of it took place on fucking Tatooine. But thankfully, That's the end of episode 1.
I'm taking shots at the enemy. I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new rock, electronic, blow the sun